Hello, my name is Joel Z. Williams and I am the Prop Master. Welcome to my Scale Model Building Club. I call it Props, Scale Model Building. Today we're going to talk about a few things, but first off the bat, I want to thank all of the viewers for really pushing this site up on the charts on YouTube. I mean, I was really impressed. When last time I looked, I think I had 16,000 views on the beginning basic scale model building course that I taught. Excellent, and I'm going to keep them going. I've recently had to sell a lot of my stuff had a setback, financial setback, but I'm getting the band back together and we're getting all the materials back together and we're going to start building again. So what I want to talk today about is the P-47N. Now this is the model, if you can see it. I purchased this on Amazon. I think I paid about 20 bucks for it. But what it represents is something that I want to take this opportunity to talk about aviation history. I think a lot of scale model builders build these aircraft and they have no real concept of how this thing came about. So I'm going to give you a little history lesson. Now, it is a fallacy, and I think in a lot of American history, because of, I think, largely attributed to Charles Lindbergh. His first flight from across the Atlantic to Paris was a huge milestone in aviation history. And let me back up for a minute. When we think about aviation history, we fail to remember that the concept of flying is a very relatively new idea. I mean, taking from the Wright brothers at Kitty Hawk in North Carolina to now, that's a little bit over 100 years, maybe 125 years. That's not that old as far as technology and industrial progression goes. If you look at any other industry, many centuries of years of developing, but this is a very quick thing, and I think this aircraft personifies the movement, quick pace of movement that is spurred by warfare, and especially aviation. So there's just some background on this aircraft. The P-47N model is the latest iteration. This was the last one built. They stopped producing this particular aircraft in 1945. That was the last run of it. But it's important to know that until as recently as 1966, the Peruvian government was flying this as their #1 aircraft. I mean, so this thing was durable. There was about 15,000 total P-47s built throughout World War II, and about only I think it was 1,500 or 1,800 of these particular models. Now, what separates the N model from others, and I don't know if I can get this, is you can see the square wing is one of the hallmarks. That's one of the easiest way to identify the N model as opposed to all the other iterations. And the reason why it's squared is to increase rate of roll. They had to, this aircraft, this particular P-47, has been in production since 1941. So they had over 4 years of tinkering with it to figure out how to improve it. In the bubble aircraft, the canopy, bubble air canopy, there's some other things that people who know the aircraft would be able to know right away, but nothing is as indicative as that square tip wing. So let me back, I'm getting ahead of myself. Aviation history is defined by what I consider to be paradigm shifts, these huge shifts in technology and the way that we look at aircraft. Up until about 1940, most aircraft in the world were not all metal. These were aircraft, portions of the aircraft would be basically wood with canvas, heavy canvas coated in lacquer, making up a lot of the structure of the aircraft. And so the P-40, the Curtiss P-40 Warhawk is probably one of the better examples of this transition. Is here you had part metal aircraft, part still that stick and canvas concept. It's not really until this aircraft comes along where we start to see this all metal, this concept of using all metal, and very thick metal too. But I don't want to get ahead of myself. let's back up to the origin of the company. The company that built this aircraft initially is called Republic Aircraft, and they're based in Long Island, New York. The founder of the company was a Russian immigrant that had come. His name is Alexander de Seversky. Let me make sure I got that right. De Seversky. This guy, this is an interesting character. He's a son of nobility, grows up in Tbilisi, modern day Georgia, Russia. His parents are able to afford to send him to one of the best aviation schools of engineering at the time, was located in Paris. Again, this is showing how new this technology was. That in the 1920s, when he goes to school, Paris is leading the world as the progenitor of some of the best science in aviation out there. Anyway, he gets his degree and goes on to be a pilot during World War I, suffers a serious injury to his leg. He later immigrates to America, trying to escape the Bolshevik revolution that's going on in Russia. Comes to America and immediately he starts his company, and starts an aviation company. It calls it Seversky Aviation, and immediately hires another Russian who goes by the name of Alexander Kartveli. And we know that Kartveli is really the guy who invented this aircraft from the ground up. Him and another guy named Mikhail Gregor, but primarily it was Kartveli. And his name's not really Kartveli, that's the Americanized version of his name. His name is Kartveli or something like that. But we know him as Alexander Kartveli. One of the best designers of aircraft, because what he did, going back to these paradigm leaps in aviation, this guy, basically this company, Republic, had a couple aircraft that they were hoping the Air Force would buy, the Army Air Force at the time would buy. They worked them out for 2-3 years, put all the money into the company, into these aircraft, and they didn't get it. They didn't get the contract. And the legend goes that on the way home, on the train ride home, after being rejected for a multi-million-dollar contract, Kartveli whips out a single sheet of paper and basically creates a whole new design, which would come to be the P-47 as we know it. Some people call it the Thunderbolt. It is also known as the Jug because it is a heavy aircraft. This aircraft carries 8 50 caliber machine guns, the Ma-Deuce, the legendary heavy weapon that you'll see still mounted on the Browning M2. 8 of those. Can you imagine that on this aircraft? Plus a pretty substantial bomb load. I think at the peak of their manufacturing of the P-47, the P-47 could carry half of the bomb load of a B-17. Now that's crazy, considering the B-17 is a huge bomber, you know. So extremely heavy aircraft. We're talking about 8 tons fully loaded. So you figure your average SUV is going to be about maybe 3,000 pounds, 3,500 pounds. So this is a very heavy, substantial aircraft. And as a consequence, you're not going to get a lot of Navy people interested in something like this. They had their F-6F Hellcat, they had their F-4U Corsair with something lighter that could land on carriers. This thing is probably a little too heavy for that. So it became a darling of the Army Air Force. And in particular, when Kartveli made this huge technological advance and put a turbocharger on this engine. Now, a lot of people don't understand the effect of turbocharging an engine. Think about it, an engine that you know it's going to use gas and air and fire. Basically, it's going to burn the gas and the air is going to create combustion, and that's what's going to drive the pistons and move everything. Well, can you imagine if you take basically a big fan and you turbocharge that air that's going into that ignition chamber? You're going to get a hotter ignition, you're going to get more compression, and here's the hidden thing, the hidden benefit of the turbocharger is that as you get higher in the aircraft and the air gets thinner, up there, there's less oxygen. That turbocharger is going to still be able to put enough oxygen onto that fire, and puts other aircraft, such as the Japanese Zero, at a distinct disadvantage at higher altitude. And so it used to be in World War II, before this aircraft came and others that took the turbocharging technology, that if you got into a dogfight with a Japanese Zero or any other aircraft, really, one of the best techniques that you could do was to dive low and try to outmaneuver your opponent, try to get down low and get out of their range. Well, think about the opposite of that. Now, all you simply had to do was climb and get to a strata where they couldn't. And always in any air combat, whoever's on top has an advantage, because it's easier to dive than climb. And so that was really a monumental step that I think gets overlooked a lot in these conversations. Also, the P-47N was the first aircraft, really fighter bomber aircraft, to really incorporate the idea of a wet wing. Wet wing meant that you were actually going to use the wing surface, part of this wing, you're going to put a fuel tank in there, a 50-gallon fuel tank on each side of the aircraft, on either side of the aircraft. So you can imagine that is going to extend your range of these aircraft. Now, towards the end, this aircraft, the P-40N, this variant, doesn't come into service into the Pacific until about 1945. December 1944 would probably be the earliest. Well, you got to remember, the war in the Pacific is over in I think it's April, March of 1945. So it didn't have long to be in the war, but it was designed towards the end of the war. We didn't know that. We thought we were going to need aircraft to escort B-29, the Boeing B-29, the one that dropped the Little Boy and Fat Man, the two atomic weapons that we dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The Boeing B-29 Super Fortress, very long range, could get up very high. Now, you needed a fighter that could escort it and would be able to keep up with it, would have the range for it. You know, these B-29s were taken out of the Tinian, Saipan, what we now know as the Marianas, taken out of there and flying over to Japan and coming back. That's a long way. And so you needed a fighter like this, and you could put drop tanks on it as well. This thing could carry, it was another innovation in design. You put a fuel tank on, it looks like a bomb, but it hooks to the aircraft and it carries fuel. It extends your range. You can get out there and protect those bombers coming back. Now, some of the other things that I want to talk about, the P-47, we talked about the wet wing design. I wanted to talk about the cost of this aircraft. A lot of people forget that in World War II, basically the federal government was, I don't want to say taking over, but that's essentially what they did. Is if you built, you know, before the war, if you built roller skates and I don't know, other metal products, pots and pans, you were now making, you know, aircraft. Your plant was forced to retool and start making stuff. Well, there was a lot of overcharging as a result of that. There was a lot of war profiteering going on, and the knock on the P-47 and people. This is controversial, but a lot of people think that Seversky and others that were with Republic were gouging. They were taking advantage of that. So, but at the time, an average P-47 rolling in model, this variant, rolling off the assembly line, there was only 1,800 created. Remember. Was costing about $83,000 in 1945 money. So you know that this was a very expensive aircraft. But the thing about the P-47 that I think gets lost is its durability. This thing was beloved by its pilots because it could take a shellacking. They nicknamed it the Jug because it was just so heavy and durable. And you know, there's I can't remember the name of the fighter pilot, but there's a famous Japanese fighter pilot that had one of these in his sight and was just drumming it with I guess that would be something close to 7.65 ammunition, but he was just drilling this aircraft and surprised that it just kept flying. It wouldn't go down, and he was shocked by it. This extremely durable aircraft, and it would later, the same company would be folded into, be bought by another company called Fairchild, so it would become Fairchild Republic, and we know that this aircraft is named the Thunderbolt. The Fairchild Republic company made a air-to-ground fighter called the A-10, which is also called the Thunderbolt, but the Thunderbolt II, and it is known, is legendary for its durability. So it's extremely, but it has a pedigree. That it didn't just get there. That concept that you would put a heavy gun and on a sturdy airframe and use it primarily for air-to-ground missions is not, they didn't just cook that up in 1965 when they started making the A-10. So just a quick primer on the P-47. We're going to get into it. What I want to take advantage of, take opportunity in this conversation is to tell you that this build, I've been getting a lot of requests for beginning model builders that haven't yet invested the money in getting an airbrush, and they kept requesting, can you do a primitive build? Can you do one without the airbrush and show us how, if we can make a viable attempt at making a good looking model with just using the regular paint brushes and other techniques. So that's what I'm going to do with this one. I want to take you start to finish. I haven't began at all. This is brand new, just opened it today. Just doing a little bit of history on it. Did you think you were going to get out of this without getting a lecture in aviation history? Did you think you were going to get away? So thank you, and my name is Joel Z. Williams. Welcome back. Thanks for really subscribing and liking this channel and recommending it to all your models building friends. Thank you.